Women date older guys when they're young, then criticize age gap relationships when they get older. One of the biggest forms of female hypocrisy that I often see exhibited by women is how, when women are young, in their late teens and early 20s, they love to date older men. But then, when those same women get to be a little bit older, like in their 30s and 40s, then all of a sudden they want to criticize and shame men that date younger women. Men that are doing the same thing that they themselves did when they were younger, albeit on the opposite side. And I'm not saying that young women love way older men, because I really don't see a lot of young women dating middle-aged men in their 50s or older. But it is extremely common for college-aged women around 18 to 22 years old to be dating men in their late 20s to early 30s. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I understand why a younger woman would want to date a man who is still relatively young themselves, but also has a bit more money and everything than younger guys. So it makes sense. But this gynocentric society we're living in, it's starting to become a mainstream thing to say that the older men in those relationships are some kind of predators or something. And again, I'm not even talking about actual old men dating younger women. This isn't even about some 70-year-old millionaire dating a girl that just turned 18 last week. But people these days want to act like a 26-year-old man that's dating a 20-year-old woman is doing something wrong. And by the way, that age gap does pass the classic divide by 2 and add 7 rule, just in case you were wondering. But it seems to me that the source of all this age gap hysteria, it's coming from women. Specifically, once women get into their late 20s or early 30s, it's like they have amnesia all of a sudden and they forget all about all the older men that they used to hook up with back when they were in college, and they want to suddenly act like any man over the age of 24 that dares to look at a college-age woman must be a PDF or something. But listen, ladies, it's not that deep. Men of every age find college-aged women attractive, okay? And we are talking about women here, okay? So don't get it twisted. We are talking about full-grown women who can make their own decisions and are responsible for their own actions. That's who we are talking about. It is quite hypocritical for women to participate in that type of relationship when they're young, then try to turn around and shame men for doing the same thing when it's their turn to be on the other side of that type of relationship. And don't even start with all that power differential bullshit. Attractive college-aged women have a roughly equivalent level of power in modern society as a late 20s, early 30s man with a decent career. That's why that type of relationship is so common. It's because it is a fair match as far as societal power goes. And for those of you that think that I just said something outrageous, you think that because it's a lot easier to understand power as it pertains to wealth. So you can understand how powerful the man is in that situation, but you're probably not doing a proper evaluation of the young woman's power. Because the type of power that an attractive young woman has is something you could call soft power. It's influence, it's access. And just think about it like this. How does an attractive young woman skip the line and walk straight into the club? It's because she's hot, right? It's because she's so attractive, so they just let her in. Now think. How does a 30-year-old man skip the line and walk right into the club? He slides the doorman some cash, right? He has to bribe the doorman. So the young lady used her youth and beauty, her soft power, to get the exact same level of access that the older man got using his monetary power. And that's just one specific example, but the same comparison can be made in a plethora of situations. Soft power and monetary power are both true forms of power. And I am using the phrase soft power intentionally because I do think this is analogous to the concept of soft power versus hard power as it relates to international politics. Hard power is when a nation has influence due to its monetary wealth and militaristic might. So, a nation like the United States, for example, has a lot of hard power. But soft power refers to the influence that nations have when they have cultural influence through popular music, movies, or even philosophical ideas, basically any type of pop culture, media, anything like that. So, for example, South Korea and Japan have a ton of soft power on the global scale. And the US has soft power too, but it's kind of an outlier in that it has both types of power. But I think that still works with the analogy because it's kind of like, the USA is kind of like a successful male model or a handsome actor or something like that. It has hard power and soft power. But in general, attractive women of all ages have a large amount of soft power in that they have power and influence and privilege in large amounts because everybody wants to be around them. But that type of power is very difficult to quantify. And young women especially have a lot of soft power because youth is beautiful. In and of itself, youth for a woman is a beautiful thing. And I know this is a difficult concept to grasp if you're young yourself, even for men, but youth is beautiful. Youth is beauty. Like, let's say there's a 20-year-old woman that's maybe a little bit overweight, or maybe she just has some minor flaws in her appearance. As long as she looks her age, 20 years old, she might still be as attractive or even more attractive than a 30-year-old woman that is technically flawless in her body proportions and facial features just because the youth itself is an attractive feature. And I'm sure there are some guys in their early 20s right now listening to this thinking, what? Because that's what I would have thought too when I was that age. But just wait. Just wait. You'll see when you get older. You will. You will agree with what I'm saying when you get older. Trust me. So, young women and slightly older men actually are evenly matched in terms of power and influence. So, the whole power differential argument is just nonsense. It is a mid-wit argument. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of the women making this argument really do believe it. I don't think they're all lying because most people are incapable of conceptualizing the world from another person's perspective. And when they were young themselves and they had all of that soft power, they probably didn't even realize it explicitly, even if they were making use of it. And women also have a lot of institutionalized power because we do live in a gynocentric society. I know I say that all the time, but it is very true. We live in a gynocentric society. And that means that the perspectives, the wants, the desires, the needs of women are all that is considered when it comes to any sort of corporate or government policy making. And part of that is our entire education system is modeled around what works best for girls. So women have a ton of power just entrenched in the system. So I really don't think it's unfair to say that an attractive college-aged woman has an amount of power and influence on par with a man who has like $1 million net worth. And I would even argue that the average college-aged woman has a level of power and influence greater than that of the average 27 to 33-year-old man. So more often than not, the power differential is actually in the younger woman's favor. not the other way around. It's the young woman that has the power in most of those age gap relationships. And speaking personally, if I had as much power and influence as a college-aged woman, I would use that power to get you to like this video and subscribe to my channel. But either way, the power differential argument is pretty much irrelevant because general societal power doesn't really mean much anyways when it comes to relationships. The only kind of power imbalance that actually might matter in a relationship is when one person is in a direct position of power over the other. For example, if the chief technical officer, the CTO of a small tech company, starts dating a newly hired junior engineer, that's a power imbalance that could easily be abused because that CTO is in a direct position of authority over the junior engineer. But even in a case like that, just because the potential for harm is there, that doesn't necessarily mean that anybody's doing anything wrong, but the potential is there. It's totally possible that the CTO and the junior engineer actually have a meaningful, loving relationship, but the potential for harm is there in that type of relationship, you would have to admit. Okay, so that is a power imbalance that actually matters. But now, consider that same CTO dating a young person early in their career in an entirely unrelated industry, say a nurse or something. Well, in that relationship, there's no relevant imbalance of power because the CTO has no involvement in the nurse's industry. So there's no way for that CTO to weaponize their position against the nurse. Oh, and by the way, the CTO in this scenario, she's a woman. So checkmate, atheists. Bet you were picturing a man. But seriously, the whole power differential, power imbalance thing is nonsense. It's one of those rationalizations people come up with after the fact to try to justify the position that they already believe. Nobody's actually arriving at that position starting from a neutral or opposing viewpoint. Not unless they're stupid. And something else you hear a lot is people will say about age gap relationships, but they're at different places in their lives. Well, that's pretty much just another way of expressing the power differential argument, so yeah, I've already addressed that. But the hypocritical, former age gap participating, current age gap criticizing women, they are winning. They're winning this cultural battle. In the so-called marketplace of ideas, it's these washed up, older women that have successfully won the war on this topic because age gap discourse in the modern day is absolutely out of control, and it's reached a fever pitch. College-aged women and slightly older men are still highly attracted to each other, I'm sure, because that's just natural. But now, both groups are growing increasingly afraid of pursuing each other out of fear of the backlash. Young women are afraid of being perceived as foddy and uncouth by their peers, and men in their late 20s and early 30s are rightfully fearful of facing bodily harm. Earlier this year, a group of students at Assumption University in Massachusetts lured a 22-year-old man to campus under the false pretenses of meeting up with an 18-year-old girl. And after he arrived on campus, a mob of 25 to 30 people beat him and chased him off campus, all the while recording him and calling him a predator, a PDF. He was punched in the head, and he even had his car door slammed on his head. The only reason he was chased off campus is because he ran away. The mob actually tried to prevent him from leaving, and he had to escape. So not only did they physically assault him, but they also recorded him and attempted to publicly shame him. And again, this man was 22 years old. And he was lured to the campus to meet up with an 18-year-old girl that he had met on Tinder. And apparently, some people in the mob were under the impression that the man was there to meet up with a 17-year-old girl. And I don't know why that was, whether it was just part of the mob hysteria or if maybe the girl actually lied and told people that she was 17. I don't know. But police confirmed that the actual girl who was chatting with the man on Tinder was in fact 18 years old. And her profile did indicate that she was 18 years old. And from what I've read, she never sent any messages to the man that would have led him to believe that she was any younger than 18 years of age. Although, with that said, that detail isn't even relevant from a legal standpoint because the age of consent in Massachusetts is 16. So even if she was 17, the 22-year-old man still wouldn't be doing anything illegal, even if he slept with her. And that's hardly even an age gap at all to begin with. If you think that the average 22-year-old man is significantly more mature or more powerful or whatever than the average 17-year-old female, then you're either a teenager yourself, so you just have unrealistic expectations for what it's like to be a few years older, or you have successfully been brainwashed by the older woman shame brigade. And another aspect of this, especially with the college-aged male demographic, they are prone to being opposed to the younger woman, older man pairings because those younger women are usually the only women that they themselves, the college-aged men, have any chance of getting with. So, of course, college-aged men perpetuate the shaming of slightly older men because they want to gatekeep the high-value college-aged women and keep them all to themselves. This age gap hysteria, because let's be honest, you can't even call it discourse at this point because there's no brain function involved in this, it's just emotional hysteria. The age gap hysteria is a serious problem. It's putting innocent people in danger just for trying to not be lonely. And it's also contributing heavily to the already horrible male loneliness epidemic. I mean, in this case at Assumption University, it was a 22-year-old man that was shamed and beaten for trying to meet up with an 18-year-old woman. That's just a college-age man trying to meet up with a college-age woman. And they beat him. Somebody slammed a car door on this man's head. It's not okay at all. That's a completely normal and healthy age difference for a relationship. Even for all the people that try to make the brain-dead power imbalance arguments, there's no power imbalance there. It's a young man trying to meet a young woman. Oh, and by the way, in case you were wondering, in this particular case, there was 6 members of the mob that were initially charged with crimes in relation to this incident, but the majority of charges against most of those people were dropped. Only 2 of them, the girl that actually lured the man to campus and the guy that allegedly slammed the guy's head in the car door, those are the only 2 that still have charges against them. The way we got here, the whole reason the age gap discourse has turned into a mass hysteria, it's all a result of the gynocentrification of Western society. That's what it is. It is an obvious and direct consequence of, wait for it. Yeah, I'm going to say it. The age gap hysteria is a direct consequence of what? Feminism. Okay? This is what happens when women get everything they want and men are forced to go along with it. Women get to participate in age gap relationships when it benefits them. Then when they get older, they get to play the victim card and talk about past trauma And they even shame men and younger women for doing the same damn thing that they did themselves, guiltlessly. And that's another part of this utter hypocrisy. Women are pulling the ladder up behind them and saying, "Nuh-uh, young ladies, you don't get to date slightly older men like I did when I was young. Those men are for me now. Now and then. They're mine." It's hypocritical and it's greedy. And I would say it's evil because it seems evil, but I can't actually attribute it to malice because, I don't think it's malicious. I think it's just greedy and self-centered. Listen, I don't usually do this, but if you find anything I'm saying here thought-provoking or entertaining in some way, I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and maybe even leave a comment because I do read most of the comments. But yeah, that's about all I got to say about this one. So thank you for listening.